Good morning, everyone. It's really good to see you all. I'm Rosemary Carabine. I'm your president. Really proud to be chairing this meeting today. So you'll see me in and out. As a number of our other colleagues will be in and out as well. It's going to be a really good day. So hopefully you will have a really good time from this. Now, there are two things that we as a union have to do before any of our sessions to keep them in that safe place. So I'm going to read out the code of conduct to you for today. This is the code of conduct for all of our events, all of our meetings, anything that we need to do. So the NASUWT is committed to ensuring that all members, representatives, staff, visitors, contractors, and other third parties behave in a courteous manner at all times when engaged with work on behalf of the union. Aggressive, offensive, intimidatory, disrespectful, or other unacceptable behaviour will not be tolerated. So this is to remind you, just to remind you all. Again, it's not just this event we're going to be doing this for every single event we do. We've also adopted a sexual harassment policy. So I'm going to read the statement on that as well. And the NASUWT is committed to preventing sexual harassment and all forms of unlawful discrimination. We are committed to providing an environment free from any form of harassment, including sexual harassment, to ensure that all members, staff, and third parties are treated and treat others with dignity and respect. Obviously, further information can be found on our website for both of these codes, but they will be what we are adopting for the future. It's really good to see so many of you coming in virtually today. I don't know what the weather is like with you, but yesterday it was boiling hot here. 27 degrees it was in Essex, that's where I am. But it's really cloudy today, so hopefully it won't get too warm where you all are. Now, each session is an individual webinar, so you will need to log on to each separate one today, and the links are in the program that's been sent to you. We are promoting the use of the conference app. It's a really good app, and it's really easy for you to fully participate, and you can see it on your mobile phone and on a web browser. There is a polling which is on the home page. So any polling you'll need to complete on the home page. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties with the webinar or the app, just pop a note in the chat box and colleagues will help, and colleagues that are around will help you with that. We also would like to encourage you to join the conversation at the conference. Follow us on Twitter at NASUWT, and please like, share, comment on any of our tweets, and using the hashtag DTCC23. I think someone will put that in the chat for you in a moment. The chat box is available, which we would encourage you to use to share your thoughts and insight throughout the day. But I'd like to remind you all of the code of conduct when you are using the chat box. We have a polling session later in the day, which Jennifer Moses and Claire Ward will be chairing. You were sent a polling survey last week via email to complete. If you haven't yet had the opportunity to complete this, we will put a link in the chat box now, and you will have until 11:45 to complete this. So get polling, everybody. The findings will be shared this afternoon. It really is important to us that you do this. So if you can find the time, that would be great. Now, this bit is, I'd like to go through. If you'd like to ask questions, you have two options. You can either raise your Zoom hand when it gets to the Q&A part of the session, or you can ask a question. But we'd prefer if you could submit your question via the Q&A box, and then I will ask them on your behalf, because that would be easier for me to manage, because I can't see all of the raised hands. Please don't put any questions in the chat box, because they will be missed in the chat box. That is for you to be able to talk to each other and for us to give you information. We've planned the day with several breaks. As always, we're mindful of screen time, and we'd encourage you at these points to leave your computer and have a break. If for any reason you miss the session, don't worry. They're all being recorded and will be available on our NASUWT website. Now, without any further ado, I think you've seen another person on the screen next to me. I hope you are anyway. We have Dr. John Dale from Doctors in Unite, who is going to discuss occupational health with us. We're very privileged to have John Dale with us today. John is a retired occupational physician with past experience of local authority, including teachers' pension work. He's currently occupational health advisor with Sheffield Occupational Health Advisory Service. It's an independent service, mostly funded from the City Council's public health budget. John has been a member of Doctors in Unite and other trade and predecessor trade unions since 1974. So he's obviously called something different before. The session that John is going to do will explore what OHU is, how it should be used in the workplace, employers' legal responsibilities, reasonable adjustments to provide reasonable adjustments for employees, employees' rights on OHU reports, and the pitfalls and positives members should know about including information they can use to their advantage. It'll be a wonderful, wonderful talk. Just to say, there will be a short Q&A session at the end. And if you can put your questions in the Q&A box, as I mentioned before, that would be brilliant. Without any further ado, John, I'm going to hand over to you so that I can listen to all of this. Thank you ever so much for coming and joining us.
Well, thanks very much, Rosemary. And it's terrible when someone oversells you right at the very start. There's a lot to live up to now. It has to be wonderful, which I'll leave that to you to decide.
I'm sure it will be, John. Don't worry. We always welcome our guests warmly. So,
well, thanks. The first thing is, let's see if I can get my slides up. Hang on. This is always the tricky bit, isn't it? Can you see my slides, Rosemary?
No, John.
No, because...
No, John, I can't. I'm sorry.
Hang on, just...
You go to the bottom to the green button for share screen.
Yeah, I can't see that at the moment. Where are we?
It's a green button right in the middle with the arrow. You sort of tap the bottom and everything comes up for you.
John, would you like us to share them for you? Would that be helpful?
Can you do that? Because I'm struggling to get Zoom back up once I've got the slides up.
Yeah, don't worry, we'll do that, and you just tell us when you want to see the next slide.
I'll just
Okay.
prepare those for you now, John.
Don't worry, this happens a lot.
Yeah, the problem.
Yeah, I've always got to have support off our lovely.
It's when things disappear off the screen that
Yeah.
I then struggle to sometimes find them back again. Anyway, let me start, and perhaps Hayley can let me know when the slides are being shared. But as you were saying, Rosemary, I've been an occupational physician most of my working life, and occupational physicians are doctors who are trained in the speciality of occupational medicine, dealing with health at work. But I've retired from that now and no longer am a practicing physician. Instead, I work as an occupational health advisor part-time for the Sheffield Occupational Health Advisory Service, which is a small charity, in fact, but it's funded mostly out of the City Council's public health budget. And it was originally established by a group of radical GPs and the Sheffield Trades Council some 40 odd years ago. There were similar services set up around the country, but sadly, with austerity cuts over the years, they've all closed down again. And Sheffield is the last one standing. Yes, I've been in Doctors in Unite for a long time, but it wasn't called Doctors in Unite in the past. It was the Medical Practitioners Union, which has amalgamated with various different unions over the years, and today we are members of the Unite Union. Are you able to see my slides yet?
We'll be with you just shortly, John.
Yep,
2 more
okay,
minutes.
I'll keep talking until then. So what I am going to be saying today, I should say, is really on behalf of myself, rather than officially on behalf of Doctors in Unite or Sheffield Occupational Health Advisory Service. I speak in my personal capacity. And let me start by just going over what is occupational health. According to the World Health Organization, it's an area of work in public health to promote and maintain the highest degree of physical, mental, and social well-being of workers in all occupations. And I think that's a very good definition because it only mentions workers and improving the health of workers, which is how I've seen occupational health throughout my life. But everybody here will be aware that it's not the only definition. And the day-to-day work that we are dealing with in occupational health, either yourself as trade union members in the education field, education industry, should I say, or myself attempting to provide occupational health advice, we're dealing in a different sort of world to that the World Health Organization mentioned. The government's Arbitration, Conciliation, Advisory Service, ACAS, says occupational health is a type of medical service. An employer might want to use occupational health to help when an employee is struggling with their physical or mental health, to make the right reasonable adjustments for disabled people at work, when an employee has been off sick for a long time or is returning to work after sickness absence, to reduce the amount of time people need to take off sick, to keep to other health and safety regulations, and control risks to mental health, such as too much pressure at work, bullying and harassment. Well, all those things I think we probably all agree with, but they are a little bit ambiguous. And in particular, there are some words, there we are, I think you're now sharing screen, is that right? So,
Yes,
Yes, John, we're
can
ready when
you
you
move
are.
to slide, can you move to slide 3 now then, please, Kaylee? Which is where we've got to. That's it, that's what I'm talking about now. This is the ACAS definition of occupational health. And although every point they make is fine, there is clearly a little bit of room for interpretation where an employer may ask for occupational health to help, but to help what? Is it to help the employee or is it to help the employer? And that comes on to this. So the next slide, please, then, Kaylee. That's it. In other words, there's a collective aspect to occupational health and an individual aspect. And I think as a national trade union, NASUWT, along with other unions, should always try and highlight the collective approach, as well as, of course, representing the individual member in their dealings with occupational health. So the next slide, please. And this is a story from the BBC some years ago now. UK woodwork teacher wins health payout. A woodwork teacher who claimed his health problems resulted from his working conditions at a Cardiff secondary school has won a £200,000 payout. Eric McCreary suffered from allergic rhinitis and asthma, which he said was due to 10 years of exposure to wood dust in workshops at Llanishen High School. Allergic rhinitis is a runny nose. Hay fever is a form of it. And it is an occupational disease if the allergy is due to something at work, in this case, wood dust. And asthma can also be an occupational disease. Next slide, please, Kaylee. So a much more recent survey, just published late last year, of teachers and TAs who had been diagnosed with occupational asthma, found that almost half, 17 out of 38, the building that they were in was the likely cause, with new buildings, particularly glues and from carpet adhesives in old buildings, mold and construction dust. And then 12 out of the 38, so just under a third, bystander exposure to agents such as cleaning agents, fumes from photocopiers, I think probably older photocopiers rather than new ones. And for the swimming teachers, if there are any of you in the audience today, chloramines, which is a chemical released from chlorinated water when it mixes with urine. So unfortunately, when people go swimming, sometimes they urinate in the pool, and this gas gets formed which can cause occupational asthma. Don't want to put anybody off swimming. I do enjoy it myself, but there we go. But this bottom group, the 9 out of 38, just under a quarter, it was materials used in the classroom, most commonly MDF, in design and technology classes. So going back to Mr. McCreary, this is what he was exposed to. And it reminded me of somebody who I saw, a teacher who I saw a good many years myself, who also had the allergic rhinitis and occupational asthma that Mr. McCreary had, but had another occupational disease as well, one which was rather more unpleasant, and that was cancer of the lining of the nasal sinus. And this was a newspaper report, not of a teacher, but somebody who had worked most of his life as a furniture maker, who had developed this same cancer after inhaling wood dust. And I remember the teacher who I was talking to about this, who had all three of these occupational diseases, said that the school he worked in had health and safety assessments, but the assessment in the classroom was that it was really done from the point of view of the pupils, who maybe sat in and worked in the classroom or in the woodwork room for an hour or so a week, whereas he, and probably a technician as well, were in this room about 30 hours a week. And the dust suppression and dust extraction was quite unsuitable for anybody who was going to be in it for long periods of time. So occupational health should be used to identify conditions like this and ensure that proper protective measures are taken to reduce risks to a minimum before they reach the stage of causing occupational disease. Can we have the next slide, please, then? And also to identify vulnerable workers, to ensure reasonable adjustments are advised. Occupational health can't ensure that those reasonable adjustments are enacted. Those are management decisions, but clearly trade unions can use occupational health as part of their arguments and negotiations to make sure that the adjustments are implemented, and then to monitor to make sure that any risk assessment is effective. Okay, let's have the next one, please. We're talking about occupational ill health in education. You don't need me to tell you that the biggest cause of occupational ill health in education is stress and mental illness. Are we looking at the next slide? That's it. Thank you. You may have already seen this survey that was carried out by the Education Support charity last year, and every year they carry it out. 3/4 of education staff described themselves as stressed. 42% reported their institution's organizational culture had a negative effect on their well-being. But I think the most important of these figures is almost 60% who did not feel confident to disclose unmanageable stress or mental health problems to their employer. And again, this is where the collective approach is vital. If individuals don't feel confident to disclose this, then it's really a trade union's responsibility, I think, to gather the information together and to go to management or the employer and on behalf of membership. And the first thing that can be done is to demand stress risk assessments. The next slide, please, Kaylee. This is the Health and Safety Executive website, which says employers have a legal duty to protect employees from stress at work by doing a stress risk assessment and acting on it. So that's quite clear. And then there's a load of information on the HSE website as to how to carry out a stress risk assessment, how to reduce stress, and signs to look out for it. There's guidance for employers, for employees. There's a lot of stuff there. But I think this sentence is the one that the union can use to demand that appropriate measures are taken to reduce stress. So I've talked a little bit now about the collective approach to occupational health, but I know inevitably there's always a lot of concerns where individuals come into contact with it. So shall we have the next slide? And there's always a fear in every form of work that I've come across that when someone is being referred to occupational health, management are using this to try and get rid of them. I've always fought against that myself, and I like to think that most people who leave their occupational health referral feel much happier and feel that they've been listened to and that their point of view about their health and their work has been taken into account. But there are these days well over 150 commercial occupational health services, and it's a different form of occupational health industry to that which existed when I entered it some 40 odd years ago. Every educational authority used to have its own occupational health service. Now, most of them have been outsourced, and of course, most schools now no longer run by educational authorities, but by academies, multi-academy trusts who use their own occupational health services. I say their own, I mean outsourced to commercial providers. So what is the consistency between these different services? Very hard to say, and be an interesting study at some point, perhaps for a national union such as yourself, to actually look at this and compare and contrast members' experiences with different services. The next slide, please. I think when somebody is referred to occupational health with trade union support, it's important that they prepare for the appointment. And teachers, of course, are well used to preparing for everything. It always made me smile when I was doing local authority occupational health, and I'd see people from all sorts of different walks of life, whether they were admin workers for the council, road workers, firefighters, social workers, teachers. The teachers would usually walk into the room with a lovely folder that they would open up, and inside would be all sorts of color-coded resources and maybe a summarized handout that they would give me, which saved me writing lots of notes. So teachers are used to preparing, but as well as actually preparing in terms of the teacher's own health problems, I think it also helps to prepare by thinking, what do I want to get out of this consultation and the report that will be drawn up as a result of it? What would help me is the question that should be asked. And as a supplement to that, can this be achieved? If not, what will be the next best outcome? In other words, what can I live with as an outcome that is achievable? Next slide, please. As an example, where there are alleged performance issues and a possible capability procedure, which of course is always a very stressful situation, could the occupational health report stop the capability procedure? Well, that is outside of occupational health's remit. And in practice, an occupational health report cannot say there should not be a capability procedure. But what could be put into the occupational health report is that any capability should be postponed until after a phased return has been successfully completed. And that's certainly something that could be argued for, to be put into the occupational health report and included as part of recommended support or advised support to allow a return from long-term sickness absence. The next slide, please. The Equality Act is an important tool which we can use in our reports and our advice. The definition of disability in the Equality Act is a physical or a mental condition which has a substantial and long-term impact on ability to do normal day-to-day activities. Long-term means 12 months or likely to last 12 months. Substantial is not defined. Normal day-to-day activities are not defined, but work does not count as a normal day-to-day activity. There are some conditions, progressive conditions, that are disabilities by definition under the Act. For example, cancer, multiple sclerosis, HIV, and these are disabilities from the date of diagnosis. HIV is an interesting one because these days it doesn't normally cause any disability, shouldn't cause any disability if someone is taking the appropriate medication and living a perfectly normal life. But the Act says, how would someone be if they were not taking treatment? And therefore, if they were not taking treatment, someone with HIV would certainly be disabled. A mental health condition which may have recovered, but which had lasted for more than 12 months, still should be protected from discrimination. Shall we have the next slide, please? Discrimination is illegal under the Act, but only if the employer is aware of a disability. And mental health, of course, is an invisible disability or an invisible condition. And so an employee has to make the employer aware if it's something they're suffering from. And of course, there are a number of other invisible disabilities which can have substantial impact on the employee's life, but the employer may not be aware of them if not made aware of it. So the occupational health report can give advice as to whether the Act may apply. That's the Equality Act. But they can only give an opinion. It's only a legal body that can actually decide if it does apply, a legal body like an employment tribunal. But nobody wants to go to an employment tribunal if that can be avoided. So normally, an employer should accept the advice, the opinion of occupational health, and then make reasonable adjustments to prevent discrimination. But of course, the ambiguity of the Act is what is reasonable. Again, that's another word that's not defined. And what is reasonable for a large employer like a local authority, a multi-academy trust, may not be considered reasonable for a small standalone trust, academy trust that only has a single small primary school with half a dozen teachers, if such trusts still exist and haven't been swallowed up by the MATs. Next slide, please. The occupational health referral. Usually it's the manager who would make it. In my opinion, there should always be an option for self-referral to occupational health, but usually these commercial occupational health providers will only accept it through the agreed contractual process, which is via the management. But in all cases, the referral form should be sent to the employee before it goes to the occupational health service, so that the employee can check the information given is accurate and to see what questions the advice is being asked for. And consent for the referral should be obtained. That's written consent. Next slide, please. Confidentiality applies to occupational health referrals just as to any other health consultation. And both the consultation and the records should not be shared with anybody apart from the employee and occupational health. All the employer needs is advice about fitness for work, which is not a confidential matter. Next slide, please. And this is the guidance from the General Medical Council. Where doctors have contractual obligations to third parties, such as companies or organizations, they must obtain the patient's consent before undertaking any examination, which includes a consultation, not necessarily physical examination, or writing a report for the organization. Before seeking consent, they must explain the purpose of the examination or report and the scope of the disclosure. In other words, what advice has been asked for. And this is the key sentence: doctors should offer to show patients the report or give them copies, whether or not this is required by law. So, access to occupational health report. At the end of the consultation, the occupational health professional, either doctors or very often these days it's a nurse, should tell the employee orally what they intend to write and to whom the report will be addressed. Actually, sometimes I myself need a little bit of thinking time before I've decided what I'm going to write, but I've got the gist of it by the time we get to the end of the consultation. The employee may give consent at that stage to release it, but the doctor or nurse should offer to send them a written copy of the report before it's sent to the manager. And although this guidance from the Society of Occupational Medicine says that the employee might say it's unnecessary to obtain a written report, first, personally, I think they should always ask for it so that when they do give consent, they have actually read the report and seen what's in it. Next slide, please. So when the employee consents, if the employee does not object to the report, it's going to go to the manager. But I think the employee should always ask to see it, the written copy, and then they have a specified time to give their consent or withhold their consent. And usually that will be just a matter of days. It shouldn't take very long for them to decide whether or not they want to give consent. If they don't reply, the report can be sent. But what the employee has the right to do is correct any errors of fact, not to correct the opinion unless it's based on an error of fact. And the employee has got the right to refuse to consent to release the report, but then occupational health will advise the employer that they cannot give advice, and the employer can then proceed without it. So it's usually better, I think, to try and reach agreement with occupational health on what can be released, and then the employer can always add a written consent, a written amendment afterwards. Just one more slide, please. Can I have the next slide, please? Fine. Yes, this is the last slide. And this is my personal view on educational staff health before academy profits. This is my trade union perspective, that we should call to reverse all cuts, to fully fund education, abolish academies, and call for democratic control of education by staff through their unions, parents, local communities and pupils, and along with that, called for a national occupational health service within the NHS that should be freely accessible, fully funded, under the democratic control of health workers, the trade union movement, and a socialist government to carry that out. And a very final slide, just to give some sources for further information, should you wish it. Thanks. I'm going to try and get back into Zoom myself so that I can see you, and hand over to Rosemary.
Well, thank you very much, John. That was I've done a lot of referrals myself as a caseworker, and that's really refreshed what I perhaps knew, but also reinforced what else we can do as caseworkers. That's really good. There's some questions. I'm not going to particularly take them in order, because some of them I think can be answered by you. Some of them may be answered by other colleagues like Jennifer. So I'm going to ask you the first thing. Is my OHU report my document, or does it belong to management? And then the person asks, the report doesn't reflect what we discussed. So
Yeah.
what advice have you got there?
Well, those are good questions. The report belongs, I would say the report is shared. See, management have made the referral, and they will argue that they've asked for the advice, and so it goes to them. But there's no question at all that it should not also go to the member of staff. And if they are arguing that the member of staff should not have access to the report because it belongs to management, they don't have a leg to stand on, in my opinion. The report should only go to management with the consent of the person who it's written about. Now, if it doesn't reflect what was said in the consultation, and I'm afraid that is often the case, I won't say in the majority of times, I would hope it's a minority of times, but it's not unusual. The first thing would be to try to correct that by in correspondence with the Occupational Health Service. But if they won't correct it, then to submit an amended version alongside the Occupational Health Services version. Usually, I do think that occupational health try to reflect what they've been told. And the argument may be more about their opinion rather than what has actually been said by the person concerned. Sometimes it can be possible to insist on seeing another occupational health professional from the same service. That may be worth doing. I think if in doubt, ask to see somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to put two questions together now. OHU have stated on the form that I am disabled as defined by the Equality Act. My employer is refusing to consider reasonable adjustments, and I'm struggling to cope with the demands of the job. And then the second bit links to it. In what cases does it become discrimination when the employer refuses to make such adaptations? So they sort of link.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, first of all, the Occupational Health Services probably said in their opinion someone meets the criteria of disability under the Equality Act, unless, of course, it is because of cancer or multiple sclerosis or some other progressive condition which would be included in the definition of disability. But if the employer is ignoring the opinion of occupational health by not carrying out a reasonable adjustment, it may be that the argument is not that the employee doesn't have a disability, but that the adjustment is not reasonable. In the end, it's an employment tribunal that makes that decision. And it may be that if negotiations can't come to some satisfactory conclusion, that the employer should be threatened with a tribunal. Clearly, union support is very important for that. And that comes on to the second question. Could you just repeat the second question?
Yes, it's just that, oh, hang on, sorry, John, because this will be the last question in the session. In what cases does it become discrimination or where employers refuse to make those adaptations?
Yeah. Well, in those cases that an employment tribunal decides it's discrimination, it is really only that legal body that can make the decision. But clearly, if there's union support that is saying, well, we think we've got a very good case here, and we're prepared to go to a tribunal, that may make the employer think twice. Do they want to go to a tribunal and test it out with all the expenses that will cause them, legal costs, and potential reputational damage, as well as losing the case? The problem, of course, is always if this is someone who is experiencing mental health problems, experiencing stress, the thought of going to a tribunal, unfortunately, is not a stress-free thought. It's quite a stressful experience. Again, support from the union, absolutely vital in this sort of situation, to give confidence to a member. And it would be good to see some employers who think they can get away with not carrying out reasonable adjustments being pushed to a tribunal and finding that, in fact, they were expected to.
Yeah.
Of course, the problem there is always, well, the tribunal outcome isn't guaranteed either.
No, no.
But it all depends on the strength of the case and the individual circumstances.
Okay, and you can get help with that from your local regional centres and things like that. There were a lot of questions, so I couldn't ask them all in this session. So I'm going to now close this session and thank you, John. Those questions that weren't answered, we will be trying to get them. Either John will answer them or someone will answer them. So please don't think your questions haven't been answered. Now, please remember to do the poll-in. Don't forget, 11:45. So I'm now going to take the comfort break. So it'll be a 10-minute comfort break. So if we come back at 11:05, please.